Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this course. My name is Ahmed, and I'll be your lecturer for the first part of this course. Now, in this course, as you have probably seen in the course outline, we'll be going through a lot of different concepts with regards to risk management and how it's applicable in our construction industry. Now, my part will focus on introducing some of the assessment procedures that you can implement when it comes to risk. But this first lecture will just be a quick overview of the risk management procedure. Now, um, when you go through any risk management book, probably the first quote that you will read is the one that you see in front of you. And that's the quote by John Shedd. A ship in a harbor is safe, but that's not what the ship is built for. Um, and that's basically a principle that applies to all industries. So if you want to keep something safe, of course, you'll protect it from all sorts of risks, but then you're not actually utilizing that thing that you're protecting in the right way. And that's why we have risk management. So we need a way of making sure that we can protect um, the our project, for instance, in our case, from any sort of events that can cause some sort of disruption. And that's a better strategy than just, trying to safeguard um, our project from sort of all sorts of activities. And hence, we might not need to undertake any sort of projects if that was the case. So continue the project, do what you have to do, but you have to do it in a smart way such that you defend your project from any sort of risk that it can experience. And that's what risk management is about. So, as I said, risk management is about defending your project from all sorts of events that can take place. And we focus on uncertain events when it comes to risk management. The reason we focus on uncertain events is because these are events that are very hard to predict. We also have to bear in mind that the events that we try to protect our projects from, they usually impact the objectives that we have. So for certain projects, we have certain objectives that we need to achieve, and some of these uncertain events, they can negatively impact these objectives. So we need to understand the link between the event and the objective that we have. Now, not all events cause a negative risk. We've got events that can lead to positive risk, and a positive risk is labeled as an opportunity. So we do need these opportunities. So we're not protecting our project against these opportunities. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to maximize the opportunities, and at the same time, we're trying to protect the project from the negative risks. So from anything that can detrimentally impact our project. Now, different organizations, and you can see that in the fourth point, different organizations have different risk tolerances. So one organization can happily accept a certain risk that wouldn't be necessarily the case for a different organization. So depending on your organization, depending on how it operates, the kind of projects that it operates on, will get different risk tolerances, and these are basically measured through thresholds, as we will see later on in the course. Again, part of risk management is prioritizing these uncertain events. So we've got a particular construction project, we've identified the uncertain events, and we've determined the impact on our objectives. The next step is to prioritize the risks. And when we prioritize, we basically rank the risks and we see what kind of measures can be implemented to combat these ranked risks, right? So your highly ranked risks would be a risk that you need to implement certain measures in order to reduce their impact. And then as you move down the list, it's less of an impact and you'd worry less about the risk. Now, prioritizing the risk is all about minimizing the probability of occurrence. So if a bad thing were to happen, and we know that this bad thing will happen, our role in risk management is to minimize the probability of occurrence of that risk. So if the chances are 1 in 10, we want to increase, or we want to decrease the chance to 1 in 100, right? So make it less likely that that risk will happen. The other way that we can look at it is via impact. So if something was going to happen and was going to lead to a loss of $10,000, how about we try to minimize that loss to $1,000, right? So these are the two ways that you'd look at when it comes to risk management. Um, Now, why do we need risk management? Well, there's a couple of important points that you have to realize. Now, the first point is it's important to eliminate potential problems because, as I told you, you've got objectives that you're trying to achieve in a particular project, and these risks, especially when it's a detrimental risk, so when it's a negative risk, it's going to impact you as an organization, you being able to achieve your objectives. So it's important to understand, the impacts of the uncertain events on your objectives. You also have to realize, and that's mentioned in the second point, that there are risks that you have to take in life. And we go back to the quote that I had initially. So if you've got a ship and all you do with it is just park it in the harbor, you're not actually achieving a lot with it. That's not the full purpose of the ship, right? So you need to undertake certain activities in order to generate profit, especially when you're talking about, a construction project. So for you to be able to do that, you have to take risks. Now, the risk that you take usually is correlated with how much profit you generate. So the higher the risk, the higher the return. And so our role in risk management is to make sure that, if we have a certain risk, we try to minimize that risk, but at the same time, we try to get the eventual return that we would get because of the event that we've taken or we've undertaken. So you can think about risk management as a value creating procedure. So you create value when you prioritize your risks, when you understand how they impact your projects, and when you try to minimize the probability of occurrence of the risk, and when you minimize the impact that the risk can have on your objectives. Now, these are a couple of points you can see in front of you. If you want to do something, and that's what actually these points that you see on the screen, they summarize the risk management process. So if you want to succeed in something, you have to plan for it, right? So you plan before you do. And then when you do it, you have to check that you're following the plan because you have a plan and all of your objectives are listed down on the plan. So when it comes to implementation, you need to make sure that you're following the plan. Now, if there's anything that forces you to deviate from the plan, and that's probably due to a disruption, what you need to do is you need to understand what created that disruption and what caused you to steer away from the plan. And if there's any necessary acts that you can implement to shift you back to schedule or shift you back to the plan, then you do that. And that's basically what we'll be doing when it comes to risk management. So we need to understand the risk, the impact that it has, the probability of occurrence, and then how do we, when it does happen, how do we deal with it? How do we monitor the risk? How do we reduce its impact on our project? Now, the process itself can be summarized in the 6 steps on the slide that you could see. So the risk management process, it starts off with planning. So you need to plan, understand what are your objectives, and what's the purpose of the project that you're undertaking. And then you move on to the second process, which is identifying the risk. And then the third one is evaluating the risk. So this is where you'd see how much of impact it has on your project, what's the probability of occurrence, what's the response that you take, and that's the fourth step. And then the fifth and sixth steps are monitor and control. So you need to monitor the risk. And once you understand the risk, you need to take control actions just to make sure that you're shifted back to your original plan. Now, the references that I've used, in this very short video. They come from the PMBOK, so PMBOK, the fourth edition. That's a very good reference. I'd highly recommend you guys to have a look at that. In the next future videos, we'll be diving very deeply into other aspects of the risk management process. Thank you very much.